Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of Policy Watch with me, Frank Pereira. As India celebrated the completion of 70 years of independence, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday gave the country a new slogan, Unify India, as he outlined a vision of building a new India that's free of caste and religious differences, corruption and terrorism, and where all Indians have access to housing, electricity and water. In his fourth Independence Day speech from the Red Fort that lasted about an hour, Modi set a deadline of 2022, the 75th anniversary of India's independence, for the transformation of the country into new India that would fulfill the dreams of the young and women and see the income of farmers double. In his address, the Prime Minister held forth on a number of current issues as well as provided his take on how he is looking at solving problems that India is facing. In the first segment of Policy Watch today, we will analyze the economic takeaways from the Prime Minister's Independence Day address. Joining me on the program today are Priya Ranjan, senior journalist, and S.K. Jindal, Chairman, Investment and Capital Markets, ASSOCHAM. Mr. Jindal, I'd like to begin with you. What are the economic takeaways from the Prime Minister's address on Independence Day?
I heard the speech and I thoroughly enjoyed it. He was quite focused. One big idea was that he wants to create job creators. People, he wants them to come forward who can create some business, some entrepreneurship of their own with small funding, small capital goods, small beginning funds, and who can also offer jobs to 3, 4, 5 more people. If this kind of thing happens, it is very good for the country because we are in a hurry to create jobs. And this kind of creation will be self-creation. We are creating those people who will create jobs. So this can work very well. As I earlier also I mentioned, if I get a degree, I don't get a license for a job. Only thing is that we should be prepared to start with any kind of job. It could be even tea shop or driving or anything, any petty job also. 1 year, 2 years down the line, we will get our better position or our right position. We should not think that until and unless I get that position, I will not start. So that degree should not give us that kind of feeling. We should be prepared to do some positive thing. And it is quite doable that if somebody starts with a small capital, his own thing, he can create some more jobs together with that and he can be successful. So what economy needs is such people who are not dependent on anybody else, and then people look at them and they also start. So this will be something, a mushrooming kind of effect one can generate there. Second thing is vision document. For example, he is also already talking about 2022, 5 years. We should always be planning for at least 5 years, some vision document. We should be able to follow the direction, and in the process, we should be able to take the people along. Then only the success comes in a big way. Big ticket reforms also, what he has done now and in future also, will be required for the economy always. These two, demonetization and GST, what it did for us, it did a lot, and the results, as I look at, we will have ummeed se zyada results because it will be coming from different directions of the economy, different levels from the economy. You will see some positive result coming in, etc.
Sure.
So these kind of things are which were required, and this is what he is focusing at. So in the longer run, we should be working on those long-term vision policies. Policies have to be friendly for people and inclusive growth policy, and growth we cannot, there is no way that we can leave it behind.
Okay, no compromise on growth is what you are suggesting. Mr. Dash, mention was made of GST as well as, several other things that Mr. Jindal just brought up, but also a lot of emphasis on corruption, black money holders, and that seems to be the agenda really as far as the government is concerned and the Prime Minister is concerned. Is that really going to answer the problems as far as the economy is concerned?
Well, there is no doubt that this is very important. That India has had this systemic and structural problem with the economy of both a large parallel economy, parallel economy, black economy, informal economy, whichever way you may call it, and then corruption in the system. Now, that corruption also extends to non-transparency in and tax evasion and restriction of the tax base. So both GST and the fight against black money and the fight against corruption, that is very important for the new India that the Prime Minister has envisioned for 2022. This is very important, and that's why he's focused it as a holistic package, I would say, in the speech that he made from the ramparts of Red Fort. And also, like Mr. Jindal mentioned, the focus on entrepreneurship and self-employment. People who would be joining the labor force, and as we know, there are 12.5 million people every year,
yes,
who are joining the labor force. That kind of jobs or employment cannot be created by the government or even by the private sector to provide and make these people joining the labor force to come into the workforce.
Mr. Jindal was mentioning creating job creators.
That's right.
Is that the answer? Is that the answer to the problem?
But more important, I would say, is also the fact that, basically today you have 60% of your people engaged in agriculture and allied activities. Now, there is a distressing situation in the rural economy, in the farm sector. The Prime Minister has addressed that too in talking about this focused attention on those 99 agricultural related projects to elevate the distressing situation that we have today in the farm economy. So while the attention is being made on the agricultural and rural economy, so that, and focusing on these 99 projects, I thought that was a very important takeaway from the speech.
Sure.
You have to envision a new India of 2022 where you must have a radical change in the structure of the economy, both in relations to corruption, black money, and with relation to development of entrepreneurship, so that it creates a lot of self-employment and job providers rather than job seekers.
Mr. Jindal, I know you're an industrialist, but I'm going to ask you an agriculture-related question, because the Indian economy has always been an agricultural-centric economy for many years. But then the contribution to the GDP as far as agriculture has gone down drastically and tremendously over the years. Is it time now to boost the agricultural and the rural economy once again?
Absolutely. It is very much required now, and one good thing is government is focused on it. About irrigation plans, Mr. Modi mentioned that he had about 99 plans and 33 has completed and others are on the way. All these things, whenever you are taking, for example, growth thing, holistic approach, as Mr. Dash said, is very important. Everything has its own merits and demerits. All positive things you have to promote. All negative things you have to put them down. For example, anything which gives better conditions for the farmers, they have to be promoted. Anything which is not in their favor, they have to be sidelined. Similarly, the role of corruption and terrorism and filth, for example, cleanliness and health also plays a very important role in the overall holistic measurement of growth. Because if health is good, like on health front he is doing so many things for common man. If our health is good, our expenses on hospitals and medicines goes down.
Right.
The same money we use for our betterment. Similarly, if it is cleanliness, that gives boost to our health also. So all these things are interrelated, and all negative things one has to avoid and keep them down, and all good things one has to embrace. Cheap medicine is focusing on, which is very good. And today we saw about this knee replacement and earlier heart stunts, etc. The cost has become almost 25% of the original price which you were paying earlier.
Yes.
Now it has come to about 25%, which means it has become accessible by everybody, which was earlier not accessible for them to pay 2,50,000 rupees, but now 60,000 rupees they can arrange for their legs. So these kind of things, everything adds, and it is adding. That is how we are changing level. From this level we are going to a higher level. We can see ourselves approaching higher levels because of these things, and we cannot only focus on one or two things and then we can.
Yeah, it has to be a holistic approach, is what you said, and you stressed upon that as well. You know, Mr. Dash, what should the focus areas in the near future be? The Prime Minister has spoken of a 5-year plan. He's spoken of how 2022 is going to be extremely important. 75th year of India's independence is going to be like a report card and, you know, a stock-taking measure as such. But what needs to be done immediately?
See, immediately, if you look at from the speech itself, the Prime Minister has not repeated the important programs that he's already mentioned in his earlier addresses from the Red Fort. Those are ongoing. That doesn't mean that the focus is not on that. So those programs are ongoing, and the government clearly is trying to have more deliverables out of those programs, such as you know, the Make in India program, the Digital India program, all those programs which the Prime Minister in previous years had announced from Red Fort. Now clearly the deliverables, the emphasis has to be on deliverables of those programs,
right?
Which is today you do not see on the ground getting reflected too much. So now the focus has to be as to what those programs would achieve,
right,
in concrete terms, so that, and now clearly he has a broader vision for a new India, of India without corruption, without black money, India which is, you know, Swachh Bharat, and so that kind of a vision is fine as a vision, and it's right that his Prime Minister has moved on,
right,
from the immediate to the future, which is not very distant future, but only a 5-year plan in terms of emphasis. That doesn't mean that the ongoing programs and policies, the emphasis on the deliverables has to slacken.
Fair enough. Okay. On that note, then I'll have to call it a wrap on this first segment of Policy Watch. I'd like to thank Priya Ranjan Dash and SK Jindal for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. It's time for a short break now, but still to come, your credit data is at risk as hackers seek to bully startups. How grave is the threat and how can we protect data? That's what we will discuss on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Tales that inspire. Stories of social change. A salute to diversity. Promoting public discourse. Events that motivate. Inspiring the innovative spirit. Watch Rajya Sabha television documentaries.
Welcome back. You're watching Policy Watch with me, Frank Pereira. After infiltrating your bank account and email, the next big high for a rogue hacker is combing your credit history, data that captures your earnings, defaults, loans, and some of the well-kept financial secrets. Indian companies or banks, even those listed abroad, have rarely admitted they have been hacked. But the threat is real and something needs to be done at the earliest to address it. In our next segment, we will talk about how we can safeguard this data and what measures can be taken. Joining me on the program now are Ravi, Visvesvaraya, Sharada, Prasad, independent telecom consultant, and Apar, Gupta, cyber law expert. Thank you to both my guests for joining me now. Ravi, as far as data is concerned and data theft is concerned, how big a threat really is it, and should we be concerned?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, if you've seen the papers of the last few days, there have been massive cyber attacks that have gone on. In fact, just while on the way here, I was seeing that the social media accounts of HBO have also been broken into and have been held to ransom by this well-known attacker group which holds accounts to ransom. A few days ago, HBO was Game of Thrones also was broken into. We have had a lot of Indian financial institutions and corporations which hold sensitive personal data also being breached and attacked, and many have been held to ransom in the last couple of days. And some of these attacks are very, very elementary, and it's just a lot of negligence on the part of major organizations which leads to these kinds of cyber attacks.
Fair enough. As far as credit data itself is concerned, Apar, what is it that can be done with this credit data? And as a people, worldwide, we know how sensitive governments and others are to some of this data. But are we as sensitive as, say, someone in the US would be as far as this data is concerned?
I would say, yes, we are sensitive to that data in as much that we as an individual, I as an account holder do know that this is my data and I don't want to disclose it to people besides, let's say, a tax filing or to the bank itself. But in terms of the law and the regulation as it stands right now, it needs to develop much further, and the government is looking at it from various committees and institutions seeking to develop a kind of a regulatory capacity as well as a legal obligation on organizations. So for instance, if there's a breach of your credit data history right now, an organization or any bank is not obligated to inform an individual customer that their data has been leaked. So it just dents the trust itself when you look at a newspaper and it announces that X number of people's credit history or their financial data has been released online or is being held to ransom by a hacker group. And you always wonder, is it me?
Sure. Ravi, as far as the data itself is concerned in some of these bigger companies, because once the data is out there, it's no longer in your hands, but, you've handed it over to someone else and they are in possession of that particular data. So how can that data be safeguarded?
Very, very difficult, because once you have entrusted your data to somebody else, it is incumbent on them to store it. I just want to add a little onto what Apar has said. For instance, when he talked about compensations for breach of data laws, sections 43 and 43A of the Information Technology Act of India's Information Technology Act of 2000 as amended in 2008 do deal with the legal obligations of organizations to maintain reasonable safety practices, and they can be sued by someone who suffered damage. And also you have sections 72 and 72A of the Information Technology Act, which deal with criminal liabilities for leaking confidential information. And that's a jail term of 2 to 3 years. But really, implementing these is a problem, and certain rules have also been made. Under the Information Technology Act, you have the Information Technology Rules of 2011-2014, which deal with implementation of reasonable security practices as well as handling of sensitive personal data.
Sure.
Yes. But once you have done, once you have entrusted your data to somebody else, it's someone in a bank, your financial institution, your mortgage holder, it leaks from there, you're just vulnerable. It's incumbent on them to hold that, and it's going to be very difficult to enforce it in a practical way. And it's not just in India, it's all over the world. And some of these groups are basically in Russia, East Europe, China, and trying to get them on board is going to be a very big problem. In fact, just 2 days ago, day before yesterday, there was news of about 4,000 big oil and gas companies being attacked. And because the scale of the attack, the investigators thought it was a major state-sponsored attack. I mean, why would such companies be targeted?
Sure.
And the scale of the attack. And then they found it wasn't a state-sponsored attack, not done by China or Russia as a state. It was just one lone person in Nigeria. And he didn't even use any, very sophisticated tools. He just used ordinary ransomware and keyloggers that you can pick up somewhere. And it's just one company one oil and gas company in Bosnia which fell prey to that, and then it spread.
Sure, sure. Apar, as far as credit scores are concerned, there are several financial institutions these days. There used to be Sybil earlier. Now there are dime a dozen who offer you credit scores. There are, online portals that offer you credit scores all over the place. I mean, they all have the information. I mean, it's scary to think that there are so many organizations out there who all have your information. Are they governed by any kind of a law? Because it doesn't look like it's going to be very difficult for someone to hack into one of these websites and get that information.
Certain amounts of regulation are already invested in terms of financial institutions being compliant with certain technical standards. That is not denied. Okay. However, what's the proof of the technical security is on the basis of a third-party audit. Somebody else comes in and tests it. Is it vulnerable? Have you actually implemented it? Yes, this lock looks really good on this door, but have you actually turned out the key and locked the door itself? Okay, so this is why what we are missing today is a regulator which enforces these privacy standards and takes the protections under law which are already there in terms of industry practices, co-regulatory codes. For instance, the industry itself decides that this is how we can secure data, and the regulator says, yes, this is the best way forward, and this is how you can implement it in a practical way. And I think these are things which will develop over time. These are things which are needed. We are stepping into an age where our data itself will govern how much we own, how do we interact, and by itself, it's not only a financial but a social essence. It's a very personhood. So I would say in such a state where we are turning over our data and it's never physically within our control, and in law we have this saying that possession is 9/10 of ownership.
Yeah.
The law itself needs to step back again to restore this balance, which I see tilting away from individuals onto people who are storing our information. And they may be doing it with the best of intentions, but we need to be sure it's safe with them.
Fair enough. So is it then work in progress then, Ravi, and will a regulator really help?
Well, yes, it is work in progress. And in something like this, it is the attacker has such an overwhelming advantage over the defender. The criminal would have emptied out your bank accounts and run away and hidden his traces before you even realize you have been robbed. So, and I've seen, again, when he was talking about the best practices, for instance, some of the data breaches that have happened in the last week in some of the world's largest technology firms have happened due to negligence on the part of employees. For instance, there is the Amazon web server, which is, and everyone has a password. Now, what happened in one of the world's largest companies, which holds a lot of data, is that 5 people wanted to work on the project. Each of them didn't want to take the trouble of logging in separately. They set the password to public. At that moment, a hacker walked in and, because they set the password to public, so that 5 of them could collaborate easily and not go through the various protocols each time. Within those few minutes, a hacker managed to break in and he stole about the details of about 60,000 people.
Fair. Yeah, sure. Till that time, we get a foolproof system in place. What is what is something that we can do as a stopgap arrangement?
I think users by themselves, I would recommend that they go out, they read how much information they're turning over to a provider, how they're safeguarding it. A lot of times what happens is that it's actual negligence also on part of the user in terms of how much information they are parting with, and there is every reason for a user to also become a stakeholder in the policy debate. They need to be aware how laws are moving, they need to read up on that, and they shouldn't remain passive given that their future itself is at stake. Right now, the Telecom Regulatory Authority has floated a consultation paper on data ownership. Right now, the government has constituted an expert committee under the chairmanship of Justice Sri Krishna to deliberate on data privacy and to possibly introduce a statute within Parliament. I would urge members of the public, people who are watching this program, to write to these committees, to in fact inform themselves as to what is happening in their deliberations and become an active part of what safeguards will be available to them in future.
Fair enough. I've got time for one final closing comment. So, Ravi, then should the onus be both on the government as well as the individual himself to ensure that the data is safe and secure?
Oh, absolutely. And more than that, the onus has to be on these corporations that have your data and who are negligent in that. And generally, it's not the procedures which are written down and which they all pass the audits, third-party audits. All of them have ISO 27001. The question is implementing it day in, day out, minute in, minute out. And it just takes one negligent employee of your bank for your account to be wiped out. And again, I just wanted to add on to what he said. In terms of privacy, there also was the Justice Shah report. But the government, I think, is in two minds in terms of privacy because of the threat of terrorism and the need for surveillance. And this kind of debate of surveillance versus privacy is just going to go on and on. The government's mood right now, I think, is really moving towards surveillance rather than privacy, in spite of all these, the Justice Sri Krishna committee being set up.
Okay, fair enough. On that note, then we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of Policy Watch. I'd like to thank Ravi, Visvesvaraya, Sharada, Prasad and Apar Gupta for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have today. See you again next time.